Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? Wow, I scared myself. Okay, hey, it is Monday, March 13th, 2023. Time for another week, time for another show. It's Monday again. It is, let's see, okay, so 13th, 14th, okay, I realized that this morning, the Ides of March is coming. We always try and remember that. And I was thinking, so on the 15th, I can use as a warning in the morning for the morning post. So beware the Ides of March, of course. But then I was thinking, well, by that point, is it too late? Do you need to give warning ahead of time? I mean, the Ides of March, I guess, begins presumably, I guess on our terms, midnight the night before. So I don't know. I guess you got to be aware the entirety of the Ides of March. So maybe now is the time to warn you that at some point tomorrow, I guess midnight between Tuesday and Wednesday, you need to start being aware. That's what, beware is all about. And if you're ruling Rome or otherwise an autocrat, I guess just about anywhere, Ron DeSantis, let's say, you want to beware, except don't tell him. And, you can just sneak up on him and do what you're going to do. I don't want to get in the way. I don't want to interfere in history. All right. It is Monday. We're back after a weekend. Greg Dworkin will be with us later on to tell us what the hell happened during this weekend. It was Oscars weekend, which is, not really my thing. I don't understand why the Grouch guy from Sesame Street has a whole weekend dedicated to him, but that's cool. It has to do with movies, as it turns out. And this time, for the first time in 50 to 100 years, I have actually seen the movie that won all the awards, except I thought it was like, okay, that's kind of a cool movie. I didn't think it was like an Oscar movie, but as it turns out, it was, but it was very confusing, for me. But anyway, also, I had a hard time watching it at some point. You know what? Amazon ruined it for me, basically. I'll tell you why. They thought they were doing me a big favor. One of the things that they do now, I guess one of their promotional ideas is, and it's a good idea, if you help them help the world, they'll help you, not really, rent movies or something like that. I ordered a bunch of things from them, and they said if you, one of them can be to your house tomorrow, and another one will be at your house in 3 days. But if you want, you can select so that both of them come to your house in 3 days. And then we're making fewer trips, and we can deliver them in fewer boxes, et cetera, et cetera. And if you do that, we'll give you credit towards, stuff that Amazon does, but not the stuff that you're ordering now, but stuff that you'll buy later that we don't actually have to ship anything to you. In other words, you could get $3 off like a movie rental through Amazon TV, Amazon's, movie service, if you have one of those smart TVs. And we do have one, and it's smarter than I am, and it's annoying. But, at any rate, so you get a couple of bucks off. So I took a couple of bucks off of the rental of this movie. It looked fantastic. I liked the previews, and we were bored one day, and we were stuck at home, and we said, let's watch it. But it was so troublesome for me to figure. I had never redeemed any of their points before. And I don't think they really want you to redeem their points. They want to offer them as rewards for you to make life easier for them and then never really give you anything in return. But there's no skin off their nose, I guess, if you buy one of their movies after knocking yourself out, trying to figure out how to enter the code, et cetera, et cetera. And by the time I got it done, I was so disoriented. Then I saw this disorienting movie. But anyway, it was apparently a big triumph and a big deal for a lot of cultural reasons that lots of you already have heard about, and I have nothing to add to that story, but that's kind of cool. And the guy who won the best supporting actor role is the guy who, I'm so cultured and into movies and the film industry. The guy who played the unfortunately named Short Round in Indiana Jones and I forget which one it was. But fun kid actor, and then apparently kind of disappeared from acting, or rather other people disappeared him, I guess, really is the story, from acting. And then he came back, and now he wins this Oscar. And how fantastic is that? It's pretty fantastic. That's nice. I enjoy the fact that they won. Apparently also several bank failures over the weekend. Well, not several, two bank failures, but somewhat connected, and no one's exactly sure what to do about them, and we're not exactly sure what we're supposed to feel about them, and we'll see if we can figure that out perhaps over the coming couple of weeks, because, there's dueling messages here. One, the bank that originally, the first of the banks to fail is Silicon Valley Bank, which apparently is, like the venture capitalist Silicon Valley, venture capitalists bank of choice for various reasons, some weird practices going on there. And it's a very unpalatable thing because a lot of jerky rich a-holes put all their money in there and demanded all sorts of deregulation or something like that. And then anyway, the place went south, and Peter Thiel may have had something to do with it, and he's a horrible person. And I don't know. Anyway, as it turns out, like most bank failures, it's annoying to have to bail out the bank, but at bottom, in many cases, the people who are really getting bailed out, of course, are the people who are the depositors in the bank. Some of them are rich a-holes who deserve to lose all their money, and others of them are not. And some of them are rich a-holes who probably deserve to lose all their personal money, but who are responsible for payroll to the people working in their fantastic startups to do things like, we're using artificial intelligence to, get more cocaine to more cocaine bears or something like that. I just recently found out that there was such a thing as this cocaine bear movie. I wasn't sure what it was, by the way. I heard somebody mention the phrase cocaine bear, and I thought, that's interesting. I wonder what they're doing with that. Is that a real story that happened? Is it an artificial intelligence meme thing? I don't know. Anyway, but all the people who are running these VC funded or whatever startups in Silicon Valley who have lots of people working for them who just need to, get paid so that they can pay for their cars and their super expensive homes that they had to rent or buy very close to where they work, where it's impossible to buy anything. And they're not going to get paid for a while because apparently all the money for their payroll disappeared. And, at bottom, as annoying as it is to have to bail out banking systems, sometimes at the ground level, you end up having to do these things that are very distasteful at the high level. And yes, very often the wealthiest people get away with the largest chunk of it. But if you get rent paid for a couple of other people along the way, maybe it's worth it. I don't know. I wouldn't touch this policy issue with a 10-foot pole if I could help it, or hot dog fingers, or any of the things that they touch things with in the fantastically successful movie Everything Everywhere All at Once. Greg's here. He's got everything to tell you. We'll pace it out, though, over the course of an hour. Good morning, Greg. How are you?
Good morning. So I didn't watch the Oscars. I don't generally watch those shows.
Yeah, I missed it.
I don't have a lot to contribute other than to point out that the reason Brendan Fraser was away from acting is
Brendan Fraser.
he says he was
right,
blacklisted because he spoke out about being sexually assaulted by a former president of the Hollywood Foreign Press Association.
Wow.
A fellow named Philip
right.
Roke, who was a big shot, and so he and Hollywood didn't get along.
Yeah. All right. Well, I remember that one. So it was a big night for returns to acting in general. So several. I don't know why the other guy was blacklisted, but I was thinking of the other guy, whose name I forget, but who was in the big movie. That one. But Brendan Fraser too. Another story, and much more attuned to, I guess, our areas of interest. We're not film people. We should have done a Siskel and Ebert show of reviews of movies neither of us have ever seen.
So I thought it was kind of relevant.
Is that what happened? He got the best
Fraser
actor. Is that a big deal?
Yeah, for a movie called The Whale.
The Whale. Yeah, I didn't see it. I don't know anything about it. I'm sorry. Yeah. Well, but thank you for telling me.
The Whale was about something different.
Cocaine whale?
You may know this. But, the whale is often used as a reference to the stock market. There's a segue, by the way, for those of you who want some foreshadowing. Because if you have large mass, you can influence things like, say, Peter Thiel and Silicon Valley Bank.
That's the thing.
So if you're a whale, you throw your weight around and you can make things happen. So you know the story of Silicon Valley Bank and why it failed?
No.
Well, speaking of movies, since we're doing Oscar-themed stuff, all you have to do is watch Mary Poppins.
Really?
Yeah, there was a run on the bank.
Oh, okay.
See, Michael and Jane were in the bank with Dad.
Yeah.
And old Mr. Dick Van Dyke wanted to steal his tuppence. And Michael said, "Give me back my money." And everybody heard him and turned around and said to the tellers, the bank won't give that boy his money back. I want to take all my money out right now. And everybody started to do that. And they closed the teller windows and they closed the doors. And everybody in London came to this bank to get their money. And that's basically what happened. And watch the movie. You'll understand totally how bank runs work.
Well, yeah, I figured out how
really
they
well done. It was a documentary.
Who knew at the time?
Right.
I knew only vaguely that people were saying that Peter Thiel, evil person in general, was spurring this on.
So here's what happened.
In some way.
Okay, this bank was around for a while, and it's not a shady bank. It's just a little weird.
Yeah. Well,
they
had some weird
are
practices
very much into financing venture capitalist startups.
Yes.
So Silicon Valley really likes them.
Right.
And part of the reason is because on the one hand, they lend you money for relatively low fees, and on the other hand, they make you put your deposits in the bank.
Right. It is a little weird.
And so if there's more to it than that, the regulators will get into it. But in the meantime, seems like legitimate enough. It's just that essentially taking your deposit and putting it in the bank is getting money fast. They then turned around and took that money and bought long-term bonds.
All right.
Which over time would pay them more than they borrowed from you.
Yes.
And so they made money. Except that some of the bonds they bought were fixed rate.
Uh-huh.
So now the Fed says, oh, inflation, this is bad. We're going to raise rates.
Yeah.
Well, you own a whole bunch of fixed rate stuff, which is now worth less than it used to be because the rates all around you have gone up.
Yes, I'm familiar with that problem.
So what do? Well, what if the customers, the depositors, say, hey, we know your situation. I'm a little worried. I'm going to take my money out. And they have to give it to you.
They're supposed to.
But they took all that money and they put it in these bonds.
Yeah.
So and that's not liquid. The money you give them and the money you take out is supposed to be very liquid. You can put it in today and take it out tomorrow. But if you buy a 10-year bond or property, or something like that, you can't turn around and get it tonight.
Yeah, okay.
To give you your money tomorrow. So they realized that they were having a little bit of a cash flow issue. Mm-hmm. And instead of going to the feds and saying, hey, we're having a little bit of a cash flow issue, they decided what they were going to do is sell some of their properties and or assets and or bonds, something at a loss, at least to have enough cash so if people wanted to get cash, they could do it.
That actually sounds
Peter
quite
Thiel heard
responsible.
about this and told all of his buddies, hey, there's something going on here where the bank is sort of like selling assets less than it's worth. Maybe I ought to take my money out of that bank.
Yeah.
And his friends say, hey, maybe I ought to do that too. It's just that these folks are, as we like to say in the trade, really online. Mm-hmm. So instead of talking about it over whiskey at the club with the thick leather chairs and the moose head and the old British shows, they did it online on Twitter and places where you could see it and read it. And so everybody knew. And so everybody came to get their money out at the same time, just like Mary Poppins. And the bank didn't have enough money to do that, and so they got in trouble.
They needed a spoonful of sugar.
Yeah. So
all right.
The regulators came in and said, look, part of the reason you got in this trouble is you didn't have enough cash value around to back up and backstop this sort of thing. And part of the reason that happened is because Donald Trump passed regulations at your behest to decrease the regulation on this and to decrease the testing that they would do on banks because this is what you wanted. Because you were complaining, and all you tech bro libertarians were complaining that the community banks are at a great disadvantage compared to the too big to fail banks from the 2008s, which is one of the reasons why nobody wants to touch this policy with a 10-foot pole.
Yes.
And, we need to let the market be the market and let these people do their entrepreneurial thing and give us cheap money so we can borrow and sell it and make money on our own. And so under Donald Trump, the Fed said, okay, you can do that. Mm-hmm. And so now they found themselves in this situation. And those rising rates were the penultimate reason why the bank had to run, although Peter Thiel and the whale was the ultimate.
Yeah, I guess so.
So that's the background for that. The problem is there's a whole bunch of community banks in that situation. So you can't just turn around and say, well, that was them. They should have known that interest rates were rising. We're not finance people. We knew interest rates were rising. Why didn't they plan for it?
Yeah.
That's a great question, and the people who run the bank ought to be fired, and they ought to get no money. But there's other banks out there. And there are other community banks who have a similar problem in that some of their assets are tied up, and as rates rise, they don't necessarily have the ability to turn around and get the same value for what they had with these assets. And so part of what the Feds did over the weekend is to say, look, we closed SVB, Silicon Valley Bank. We'll talk about Signature Bank in New York, which is a different problem. They're a crypto bank.
Oh, well.
And New York State closed
definitely
down and said, look, we're going to take you over and make sure you don't fail for different reasons. And by the way, no more lending to Jared Kushner and Donald Trump for their golf courses from this bank.
Well, they were doing it anyway, but yeah. All
then
right.
There's other banks. And so this morning on the market, bank stocks are not doing well because people are worried that maybe there's a bunch of other community banks with exposure, and they want to make sure that this doesn't ripple through the economy. And so that's why the Feds acted over the weekend. And even though you may have online seen a whole bunch of tech bros saying, we are for free markets, except when it's our money, in which case the Feds have to come and bail us out.
Right.
You have to anyway, because you don't want all the community banks to fail, because there's a whole bunch of midterm and small business jobs tied up with that, and you want them, in effect, to be able to meet payroll this week. And if their money's in the bank and tied up and they can't get their assets back, they can't meet payroll. That's why the Fed said over the weekend, anybody with money at SVB is going to be made whole. That is to say, you're going to be able to get your money back as of Monday morning. And the reason is we know that you use it for payroll, so you can have it so you can pay your people.
All right.
And that's basically what's going on. But really, if you really want to know what's going on, just watch Mary Poppins.
Okay. And blame Peter Thiel. You're always probably in good company with that.
Yeah,
and,
well, if you want to try to decide who's the bad guy, well, he's a bad guy. But really, if you step back and look at the big picture, the question is going to be, given that all this happened, what's it going to do to the Fed and their desire to raise rates all the time?
I don't know.
You may have recalled, we don't know that much about finance, at least when I say we, I mean me.
Yes, I'm there too.
Well, we, okay. But the idea that raising rates is an ultimate good, it's a wonderful thing to do. You should raise rates all the time. That's why the Feds do it, was pushed back a little bit by saying, look, trying to drive the economy into a recession by making sure that people don't have jobs just so that you could say that inflation is down, maybe that's not such a great thing
at all. Right.
Well, this bank failure puts an exclamation mark on that. Raising rates isn't always good.
Yeah. Wow. Jeez. Okay. I'm glad they're, I guess, getting that message.
They definitely got that message. And so the expectation is with their next meeting, they're not going to raise rates.
Oh.
They were, but after this, maybe they'll hold off and see what happens.
All right. Meanwhile,
so 'tis an ill wind that blows nobody any good, as they like to say.
I guess.
Maybe not raising rates on the rest of the economy, which is strong, will be okay. And if you're a banker, it's probably not a good Monday for you. But for the rest of us, it's still unclear whether or not this is a big deal.
All right. Well, no. We'll have to wait and see.
It could be. The idea that it's just a single bank, that's not true. It definitely affects all mid-sized banks and community banks and those who have freed themselves from regulation and those who have invested too much in things that interest rates are going to erode. So the Feds have to be able to lend you cheap money in order to say, look, we'll give you enough money to make up for those assets. so that you could use that as collateral instead of your assets. And that way you don't have to tell your investors and depositors that you're in trouble.
Oh.
And we're the feds. We have a lot of money. We can do that. And they will, and they have. And that's part of what they did over the weekend.
Well, all right. And yesterday they were working with one less hour or so. That's quite a feat.
Well, yeah. I mean, so one of the things that Silicon Valley Bank invested in was 24 hours a day, and it turns out there's only 23. And so they really couldn't meet their obligation for that 2 o'clock time frame. Right. And that's part of the reason why they collapsed. And, of course, that's Peter Thiel's fault.
Artificial intelligence told them there was an extra hour, and there really wasn't. It was a liar. And that's, I guess, how it happened.
Yeah.
And good explanation. I think that helps straighten things out. And Peter Thiel, what are you doing? I mean, it sounds like the bank was actually... You know, for a bunch of Silicon Valley bankers, I mean, that's a double whammy. Silicon Valley and bankers was doing clunk bang, everything okay? Doing things relatively responsibly. Like, hey, you know what? We're supposed to have more cash on hand, and we made a bad call, but we need more cash on hand. And instead of whining about it and saying the Fed should send you the cash, why don't we do some financial things and sell some stuff? And, you know, we won't make as much money as we thought we would. We might even lose a little bit of money, but we'll be fulfilling our obligation to have cash on hand in case people want. And the first guy who finds out, oh, they're actually, you know, taking a little bit of a business loss so that the rest of us don't have to, says, everybody take a business loss. Yeah. And then they go crazy. It was a foolish thing to do, as most bank runs are, I guess.
Right. Well, you know, it's interesting to watch libertarians squeal.
Yeah.
And essentially what they're doing is making the case, if you read between the lines or even just read what they said right up, they want more regulation.
Okay.
At least if it protects them.
Okay.
What they want is cheap money, which is why they love this bank.
Well, I love money too.
Cheap money. They want to be able to borrow and not get charged a whole lot for it, so they have a lot of money to throw around. And if you know, did this bank say, okay, well, we'll lend you the money at a lower rate, but you have to put all your money in our bank? Is that the deal? We still need to find that out. But they love cheap money. The idea that, on the other hand, their scheme might fail and cost them money really bothers them, and that's when they want the feds to intervene. So, you know, bunch of hypocrites. We all know that. And you have to understand that even though the tech pros and libertarians and VC people are probably the most unpopular group of people this side of used car salesmen, there's still a lot of people with legitimate small businesses who have to meet payroll, where the people on the payroll are like real regular people.
Yes.
So you have to do this.
The hipster coffee shop workers, where all of this stuff is overheard.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, you can't get mad at Starbucks without remembering that the baristas who work there are the people who get hurt when you start dumping on Starbucks.
Yeah, or anywhere else, and small independent coffee places too.
Exactly right.
All right.
Now this is a different one. We'll probably take us to the end of the first segment here, and then we can be done with this. But this is from the New York Times this morning. Risky bet on crypto and a run on deposits tank Signature Bank. Regulators said keeping open the 24-year-old institution, which hold deposits from law firms and real estate companies, could threaten the financial system's stability. And that be a lesson to you, folks. Don't let a 24-year-old run your finances for you.
Right. Well, yeah, we're learning that lesson all over the place. Crypto and everything else. Okay. So, that helps straighten things out a little bit. I feel a little better about what's happening in Silicon Valley Bank. Anyway, it's a bad name, really, when you're thinking about this bank is going to need sympathy for a federal bailout. Silicon Valley Bank isn't the name you would think. It's a little bit of a PR disaster.
Yeah, I mean, and so when do you run on a good financial spreadsheet, and when do you run on vibes?
Yeah.
And that's important.
Oscar time.
New York Times. 3 lessons from Silicon Valley Bank's failure. Here's one takeaway. The bank's extremely online clientele may have contributed to its downfall, and maybe the only moral of the Silicon Valley Bank story, if you're a bank and many of your clients are tech startups whose funding ability is sensitive to rising interest rates, don't invest your deposits in long-dated bonds that'll lose value if the interest rates rise. But, there's some other lessons to be learned as well. Andrew Ross Sorkin, writing about it in the New York Times, said, why did the bank collapse? A run on the bank, like Mary Poppins, The company was not, at least until clients started rushing for the exits, insolvent. But if the banking business is ultimately a confidence game, that game can end quickly.
Yeah, and that's really kind of what it is. That's what money is anyway. Quite honestly. So, okay. Well,
and then finally, this is from Playbook. Everything about the bank crisis explained all at once. That's one stop. If you want like everything in one piece here, then you could do that. So another mid-sized bank, First Republic, one we haven't talked about, has similar issues as SVB and has come under close scrutiny over the past week. And it saw its shares drop precipitously in early trading. Global stock markets are trending downward amid fears that all the containment measures taken so far won't solve the core problem of some banks. That's why the feds have to lend them money.
All right.
So that would suggest the federal government's emergency moves last night could be just the beginning, not the end of Washington's response. So here's what the Treasury Department have already announced. All of SVB's depositors will be able to access all their money as of this morning. Any losses to the Deposit Insurance Fund to support uninsured depositors, that's DIF, Deposit Insurance Fund, FDIC.
Yes, I know
that sort of thing, will be recovered by special assessments on the banks. That's how they can claim that it won't cost taxpayers any money.
Mm-hmm.
Banks with SVP-like problems will have new federal lenders.
Okay.
And New York-based Signature Bank, which suffered a run on Friday, was closed and will get the same treatment as SVB. Interestingly, the bank had some notable political connections from Barney Frank to Jared Kushner. But Signature's problem was crypto. SVB generated panic because of what happened with FTX.
Okay. Another alphabet soup. Okay.
Mitt Romney says right decision. Marjorie Taylor Greene tweeted out gibberish.
Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's continue with banking, because we all understand banking.
Well, Signature, if SVB had a specialty in helping out venture capitalists and tech bros and angel investors and such, Signature in New York, according to the New York Times, dealt with professional services, lawyers and banking services to law firms providing escrow accounts for holding client money and other services like that. But the New York Times has this fun piece of information here. Longtime listeners of Kagro in the Morning will recognize this and go, Michael Cohen. One of Signature's specialties was financing the purchase of taxi medallions, which authorized holders to operate cabs. It was known in New York for providing banking services to law firms and real estate companies catering to wealthy families in the area. Clients had included some individuals associated with the Trump Organization, The bank lent money to Jared Kushner, Mr. Trump's son-in-law, and to Mr. Kushner's father, Charles. It helped finance Mr. Trump's Florida golf course.
Oh.
And over the past decade, it began to expand nationally and to the West Coast in particular. But Signature ran afoul of some of the same issues that led to the demise of Silicon Valley Bank, SVB, in that most of the customers had holdings above $250,000.
Yes.
More than $79 billion, or close to 9/10 of Signature Bank's roughly $88 billion in deposits, were uninsured at the end of last year. And as of last week, Signature said more than 80% of its deposits were from law firms, accounting firms, healthcare companies, manufacturers, and real estate management companies.
The $250,000 that's the current FDIC limit.
And it also took deposits of crypto assets.
Oh, well. You're doomed.
That ended up being a fateful decision because the bottom fell out of crypto assets after the collapse of FTX and an ensuing criminal investigation. And another cryptocurrency-focused bank, Silvergate, was forced to voluntarily close last week.
Oh, we missed that one entirely.
Well, it didn't spark a whole, Mary Poppins run on banks.
Should have.
But Silicon Valley did. So that's it. That's as much as I know. We'll see what else happens. A lot depends upon how the markets deal with this. Remember, market futures predict what's going to happen, then it happens, and then people come in and say, you know what? These banks are really cheap. It's time to buy them.
Oh, yeah.
So basically, if you want to understand the financial system in this country, and this is Oscars week, it's probably best to watch back-to-back Mary Poppins and Trading Places.
Mm-hmm. I guess.
Because if you can corner the frozen orange juice,
well, if you can
then
do
you'll
that,
understand that what you want to do is you want to buy low and sell high, and not the other way around.
Yeah, that pre-existed the movie, but they popularized it for all of us. That's where we learned our Miranda rights from cop shows, and we learned buy low, sell high from Trading Places.
Yeah, exactly right.
Okay. There's another financial movie that's in the news these days for other weird reasons, long read reasons, which we'll touch on perhaps later in the show. But The Wolf of Wall Street back in the news in a weird way. So it's a preview of a story that I hope I remember I get to later. I don't want to interrupt you now.
So I'm going to change direction here a little bit.
All right.
And praise somebody who I don't usually have nice things to say, and that's Peggy Noonan.
Okay.
Who can write. Everybody knows she can write.
Yes. Drink.
Walter Shapiro, who covers presidential campaigns and had a lot to say about how not to do it wrong, had this tweet this morning. A glorious Peggy Noonan line on Ron DeSantis should be quoted at every opportunity during the 2024 campaign. It's from the Wall Street Journal.
All right. Opportunity
and
number one.
Her article is called Ron DeSantis is Definitely Running, but the tweet is free and not behind a paywall. DeSantis, she wrote, carries a vibe that he might unplug your life support to recharge his cell phone.
Okay.
It is so true. It is so on the mark.
She
nailed him. That's him.
Sounds about right. Yeah, well, he certainly fits with the Republican mold. My own thinking about it that every time they have one of these crowded fields, that it's like the Willy Wonka factory tour. Every one of them is horrible, but he fits.
The epitome of a soulless personality, challenged. It's just hard for me to imagine him doing well in Iowa. Yeah, the polls say he's okay, but they haven't met him yet. When they met him, they said,
well, and there's not much to him. You meet him and he's like, meh. Like, as you've mentioned a number of times, he's just lacks any sort of charisma whatsoever, and he's a super jerk.
Yeah, he was, glad handing and shaking hands in Iowa. You saw that tweet about somebody giving him a snowflake?
Yes, right.
And cleverly embroidered into the snowflake. I mean, it was a piece of art.
Yeah,
it's one of these things where you cut up paper and then you unfold it and it's a snowflake.
Yeah.
Except the arms of the snowflake all subtly said fascist.
Yes.
And they handed it to him, and there he is holding it up, smiling. Yeah. And it was really a wonderful picture. The thing is, he comes to Iowa and he tells the Iowans, what a wonderful state, let me tell you about Florida. Well, they're not interested in Florida. They want to know about Iowa.
Yeah, they want to.
Well, what about this issue with Iowa? Well, let me tell you about Florida. I don't know about Florida.
That is all he knows. He's speaking from what he knows. But yeah, that's not what they're going to be interested in. They say, make his whole thing, make America Florida, and we're Iowa. We want to be something else.
Right. So here's a glimpse of that from Michael Bender. In fact, a glimpse of DeSantis in Iowa. Awkward, but still winning the crowd. Still untested skills as a retail politician. A woman smiled widely and pointed to her hoodie as she told the governor that her son attended college in his home state, which is to say this Iowan said, my son's in college in Florida. Mr. DeSantis stood on the opposite side of 10 metal bike racks separating him from the crowd. He gave a slight nod to her and told her about a state's new grandparent waiver that gives tuition breaks to out-of-state students whose grandparents are Florida residents. Ms. Parker, who's a 50-year-old teacher who had driven an hour to see the governor, doesn't have family in the Sunshine State.
What?
And she was confused at his response. Here she was at an event promoting Mr. DeSantis' new book, and he was talking about waivers in Florida that didn't involve her because she didn't have family there.
But you should.
And he smiled at her and said, go Gators, and moved on to the next person. And, that isn't necessarily, I mean, if that's the best story you could find of how you interact with people, that wasn't a great event for you. That wasn't a great day.
Yeah. And, I hope it matters. I hope it sinks in,
I mean, Clinton would have given her a hug. He would have leaped over the 10 bike racks.
Sure.
and hugged her. I mean, for whatever reason, but it's just different,
It is. And, his plan is he's got a good plan for mass media, but he's in the place. I mean, if there's any redeeming value whatsoever to like super early contests in Iowa, it's still supposed to be, you got to demonstrate the retail politics ability.
Yeah. For example, here's another example. He's in Iowa. And he wants to say, like Glenn Youngkin, that education policy is what's going to drive the culture wars that are going to allow me to win because I have better policies for you parents.
That is to say, worse policies.
Yes, but the idea is to get the parents on your side. So what he does is attack parents who kept their kids out of school because of COVID. Anybody who did that was susceptible to corporate media narratives.
I see.
So you screwed up parents.
I gotcha.
And you don't come to people to ask for their vote by telling them that they screwed
You're
up.
terrible, right? You people are awful. Well, by the way, we love people who kept their kids out of school because of Jesus.
I'm just saying he's not really good at this, and that's one of the reasons why I get that everybody says, look, you have to really be careful about him. It may be that the Republican Party will turn away from Trump, and DeSantis is exactly the kind of person that they're looking for. I know you don't like me to say this, but actually Glenn Youngkin is the kind of person they're looking for.
Yes.
They want somebody who can pull this off smoothly, not somebody who's so awkward about it that you immediately get the vibe that they're going to couple their life support in order to charge their phone. And that's what Ron DeSantis gives off in spades.
Yes, that's true. And I guess that's an advantage for Youngkin. I mean, he's not smooth either, but he doesn't give off the vibe that he's going to murder you.
If that's the image and that's all you know about him, it helps him.
Yeah. All right. Well, I mean, I think this is fine, and I think you're fine just saying all these. Look, it's not downplaying DeSantis.
But I'm saying if you want to pick how to do something, that's the way to do it. Right. And it worked for Youngkin, and that's how he won.
Okay, yes, that's true. And you're also not saying, Ron DeSantis is toast because of it. It's just, look, we're not underestimating him. He just sucks at this phase of the game.
Yeah, he's really bad at it, and he's going to have to get better if he wants to win.
Yes. I mean, he might.
Now, the other dynamic here, of course, is that for all of you doubters out there, the long arm of the law is actually getting closer and closer to Trump.
Yes.
So the question is going to be politically when he's indicted by whoever does it, and some interesting things there. Yeah, we know that the New York grand jury has invited him to testify, and of course he won't. I think Michael Cohen goes back for one last thing, and then they go ahead and decide whether to indict him over Stormy Daniels.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get into the politics of what that does for him in regard to, was this the best case? You do what you do when you have it. But the point is, how does – and the other thing I wanted to add, just because if I don't, I will forget. Why did New York go first and Fani Willis in Georgia not go first in threatening to indict Trump? And the answer is because the Georgia state legislature is still in session and will be until the end of the month.
And they would
pass a law defanging local prosecutors and take control over local DAs. They've threatened to do that already in the session, but haven't gotten around to doing it.
Honestly, I mean,
so Fani Willis will wait for the session to end, and then she'll do whatever she does.
That seems so simplistic.
Justice may be blind, but justice is not stupid.
Wow. Yeah, maybe. But the legislature appears to be. I don't understand, honestly. Like, where are all the vicious, cold-blooded killer Republican legislators who should be able to she's not going to do it while we're in session because she's afraid we'll pull the rug out from underneath her. Why don't we just pull the rug now? And I don't know. They're very lazy.
It's not that they're lazy. They just don't have the votes. They wanted to take Buckhead out of Atlanta, but they didn't have the votes. There's lots of stuff that they want to do that they know is unpopular.
They don't have the votes to,
and they don't have the votes to do it.
That's
so
interesting.
You don't rile them up by saying, "Okay, well, I dare you to do it." So she'll wait a week.
I mean, that's fine.
What's the difference?
With me, I mean, I guess it's good strategy if someone tells me they really do work this way. They can't see it coming and get their act together and do this to you if you don't antagonize them. But if you do, they'll figure out they're just that blind, dumb, distracted, what have you.
I mean, there's lots of stuff they could do. But, first things first. And then, the feds take however long the feds take. So the point of all of that is that there are pending legal issues for Mr. Trump, as the New York Times likes to call him. And the question is going to be, what's the reaction to that politically? And you have to find words here.
Work. Yeah.
It will probably help him, but what does help mean?
Okay.
Right? Help means it'll help him in the Republican primary.
Okay.
He gets to claim the victim. He gets to grift his people even more.
Yes.
But more importantly, it freezes people like DeSantis, who are his rivals, who will be forced to defend him. And how are you running against somebody who you are defending? If you're defending them, why are you running against them? I mean, that's the basic concept here that they have to deal with. It's especially difficult for somebody like Mike Pence, who finally, at the Gridiron Club, said, you know what, Trump did a bad thing. Well, hooray for you. Why don't you tell the grand jury that under oath?
Right. Well, he did the bad thing that he did is not make me in line to be president.
Try to kill me.
Yeah, well.
That was a bad thing.
Some say.
They wanted to hang me. That was a bad thing.
They might have had a point, actually. Yeah, right. So
a real one. A large one.
Yeah. Who
put that up, and was it enough to hold somebody's weight or not? I mean, what was the deal with that? Was it all made of paper mache or real wood? But, if Trump gets indicted, all of those people who have bad things to say about Donald Trump because they're running against him but are afraid to say so will now really be afraid to say so. So in that sense, it helps him. Does it help him win the election? Absolutely not.
Yeah, that's where it shifts phases. The general election, where
but as you know, the only thing that matters is the Republican primary and the Republican Party.
Sure. Well, we all have to deal with the consequences. We know that
because if you watch the press, that's the only thing that matters.
Right. That and the Oscars, which are over. So now we're back to this.
Yeah. So it's all interesting.
All right. Then I will be interested in it.
So there's a story here in Axios. Republican Senate strategists are alarmed.
Are they?
That their extreme candidates will jeopardize their chances of taking back the Senate. If you've seen that movie before, notice how we're going with the Oscar movie theme this week.
Finally, it wins an Oscar. Best movie.
So their story,
okay,
which I will give to you, is by our friend Josh Kraushaar, who's leaving Axios, having left National Journal.
Get a job, Kraushaar.
Oh, he's got lots of jobs.
Oh, well, keep a job.
He's hired at a different job. He's going to be editor of one of the Jewish news magazines, as it turns out.
Really? Oh,
I forgot which one. Senate GOP's 2024 landmines.
Okay.
Newly minted National Republican Senatorial Committee Chairman Steve Daines has taken an active role in recruiting strong candidates, in contrast to his hands-off predecessor, Rick Scott.
No relation to Claire Daines.
I also don't know if Mitch McConnell's still in the hospital having suffered a concussion.
Yeah. No?
I don't know.
But yeah, we knew he fell, but yeah, concussion was what I guess got him hospitalized.
Yeah.
Good. I guess that means no broken bones. I hope. I don't know. Yeah. Do I hope?
Just a knock on the head. Maybe
knows?
That'll,
all right,
be fine, and that'll knock some sense into
what
him.
Would be like a movie, and he wakes up and he's
got a different
suddenly
liberal.
Yeah.
All of a sudden he's Ralph Nader. That would be just so funny. That strategy, you can joke about this because he's fine. That strategy is already paying dividends, with popular West Virginia Governor Jim Justice likely to announce a run against Joe Manchin, and that's why Joe Manchin is doing all these Joe Manchin things. I oppose everything that Joe Biden has done, and I always have, and I always will. Fine.
Okay.
That's Joe Manchin being Joe Manchin to get himself reelected. Do whatever you need to do. You get a pass.
Guess so.
Daines is also close to landing a Montana Senate recruit with a golden resume. Tim Sheehy is a 37-year-old Navy SEAL and Purple Heart recipient who founded 2 successful businesses and would be able to self-finance a campaign. Republicans love self-financers because basically everybody hates them and they can't get grassroots support. So it's best to run somebody who will put up the money themselves, like Rick Scott.
I guess so. Is he holding anybody captive in his basement?
That I don't know. Yes, but 3 months into the year, there are already 5 critical Senate races held by Democrats or independents in which primary headaches are looming. Montana, potential Senate candidate Matt Rosendale posed with a neo-Nazi group. That's a guy who wants to take on John Tester.
That's good. That's good.
In Ohio, Club for Growth President David McIntosh has urged Warren Davidson to run for Senate against Sherrod Brown. Davidson is a Freedom Caucus member and is viewed by GOP leaders as less electable. In Pennsylvania, of course, we have Doug Mastriano. We know about him. He wants to run against Bob Casey, and we hope he does. And David McCormick should take on Mastriano, and we'll see what happens because, again, these individual state parties for the Republicans are just nuts. Yeah. And so they would go with a Carrie Lake or a Doug Mastriano over a David McCormick or somebody who the people in Washington see as more electable.
Mm-hmm. And let me tell you, people in Washington are no great shakes either.
Right. So between the lines, many of the candidates that GOP leaders are alarmed over have ties to the Club for Growth.
Oh.
One Trump confidence of the former president's endorsement strategy will be different than 2022. He's not likely to make any because he doesn't want to look like a loser.
He's constantly at war with the Club for Growth, too, which is interesting that they're making the recommendations here.
But the basic problem is Daines has to convince Republicans to nominate the most electable candidate when the mood of the GOP base is squarely behind the most intemperate right-wing voices.
Right.
And that's basically the story, and that's, just good to keep in mind. It's not like that part of it has gone away. Now, shifting gears again. You may recall last week we covered Phillips O'Brien discussing culmination points and Breed's Hill.
Sounded like disgusting culmination points.
And why it wasn't so obvious that just because the New York Times says Russians advance again in Bakhmut, that in fact that's what was happening. So here's the AP. Russian advance stalls in Ukraine's Bakhmut, think tank says.
Womp womp. Says
the Washington-based Institute for the Study of War said there was no confirmed advances by Russian forces. Russian forces and units from the Kremlin-controlled paramilitary Wagner Group continued to launch ground attacks in the city, but there's no evidence they were able to make any progress. That was late Saturday. See, the point is what Ukraine is doing is making sure Russia suffers lots of casualties, way more than they themselves are suffering, even though they are getting heavily hit.
Sounds like a good idea in a war.
And making them run out of tanks. There's another story about Russia literally is running out of tanks.
Oh.
And running out of ammunition. There's stories about the Wagner Group pleading for ammunition on social media. Put pressure on the people back home to give us ammunition so we can, So there may be a reason for this. And at the same time, Ukraine is doing some advanced NATO-style training on light infantry units able to do counterattacks. And so basically they just may be holding on until they get their stuff together. And remember, it's already March, And so spring offensives are right around the corner.
Right. It's time for spring. Lightening your infantry is a great idea. Third, less calories than regular infantry, and great for spring.
And also less filling and tastes great. So,
what else could you want?
Why not both?
Right. And
but
another
the whole
lesson for the Russians.
That Bakhmut was going to turn out to be a disaster for Ukraine was really pushed by the Western press for I don't know what reasons. It's not like they don't have access to the same military experts we do.
Yeah, that's
It's just a question of who you choose to listen to, I suppose.
I guess. I mean, it's a pretty good guess. A city has been surrounded by the Russian army, and they're blowing everything up.
But not 4 sides, and they can't seem to close that loop. And they have been having trouble closing that loop for months.
Yes.
And so what does it mean that they can't close the loop?
I mean, I don't know why they were so intent on them doing it, but I could see where they would say, it's not looking good for this city. And
no, the city's going to get destroyed.
Well, yeah. And they'll probably lose it.
Something about a war.
Yeah, that's true. Although, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, they may have been missing the finer point of it, but probably Ukrainian sources were telling them, I mean, we'll probably lose this city. And so they went around and said, right, no, they'll lose the city. Losing cities is bad. Story done. Well, we didn't hear the rest of it. We're going to lose it, but the point is we're going to destroy the Russian army in handing it over.
Exactly right. And so,
I didn't hear that part.
That's tactics versus strategy.
I had a deadline and I wrote the first part.
You win the tactics, we win the strategy, we win the war.
All right. Well, I'm glad we had the insight on it, although, I had all my money in Bakhmut Valley Bank, and I took it out early. I shouldn't have. I should have left it in there and had more confidence. Okay. I didn't read closely enough into the situation. Oh well, and that's interesting too. So, and they're down to the Wagner. The mercenaries are begging for ammunition.
Well, yeah, I mean they were trying to get it on Etsy, but unfortunately Silicon Valley Bank closed, and Etsy couldn't make their payroll, and so they couldn't get their ammunition.
Etsy, that's the wrong sourcing. They're looking for some sort of weird bespoke ammunition. They should be on.
You got to get what
eBay,
you get.
Amazon,
they ran out of the iron stuff. Now they're looking for knitted stuff.
They're dropping crocheted bombs on us. That's it. All right, well, so I don't know what's going on, but you're not going to, I don't know how well that's going to go over. Your mercenary forces begging for, but I guess the lines are so blurred between what is and isn't government for everybody in Russia that I guess,
right.
I guess that somehow makes sense to them.
And then the final piece I can do, just because I mentioned it, I thought it would be only fair to Mike Pence to use his exact words.
Oh.
Use your words, Mike. According to CNN last night, Pence said, quote, President Trump was wrong. I had no right to overturn the election, and his reckless words endangered my family and everyone at the Capitol that day, and I know that history will hold Donald Trump accountable. And then he was asked, or during his talk, whether he was asked or not, he said, in reference to the insurrectionists, and, this is an indirect reference to Tucker Carlson, the world's biggest liar next to George Santos. Tourists don't injure 140 police officers by sightseeing. Tourists don't break down doors to get to the Speaker of the House or voice threats against public officials. So for Mike Pence, that's actually pretty straightforward. That's way more than he said up to this point. The thing is, he has to go and say it under oath.
That would help.
And stop trying to fight the grand jury. If you really mean what you say, then go tell the authorities, because they're the ones who can do something about it. You can't. You're not going to be president.
No.
You're not going to be the nominee for the Republican Party. So just do what you need to do. But the fact that he's taking that strategy and saying that openly, is meaningful.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, it basically, his political people and he have decided that trying to avoid this isn't helping him. Let's try this.
Well, it's now that phase of the election where people are looking for lanes, and he's the one going to occupy the Donald Trump tried to murder me lane.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
Yeah, he's the only one in that lane. You know,
you got
and
to
the
yourself
problem for him
clear lane
is
to the
that,
end zone.
you know, that's required to have 3 other people in the car. And it's only him.
Right.
So he's going to have trouble.
That's a good point. Right. Yeah. I'm in the lane, but it's an
I'm
HOV lane,
but, you know,
and I'm getting pulled over. Well, you could bring a bunch of people with you. A lot of people had that problem. You could probably find a couple of senators who didn't feel very safe. They could get in the lane with you.
Nobody wants to get in the car with Mike Pence.
Yeah. And you think it was weird that Mike Pence didn't want to get in the car that day. No one wants to get in the car with him now either. That's, it's okay. Yeah. I don't know how to feel about it. Okay, good. He's saying it. I hope that it results in something else happening to someone else. Really, honestly, no one cares what happens to Mike Pence at this stage.
You know, that's really the point. It is good that he's saying it, but in terms of being meaningful, it is only meaningful to Mike Pence, which means it's really not very meaningful.
Yeah. So, well, we hope for greater meaning to come from it in the future. And good luck. See what happens.
Right.
Okay. Well, we've made it to the end of the hour pretty much, so that's good news. I mean, for you, because you get to go.
Yeah.
The rest of the day is wide open for you. You can catch up on the Oscar-winning movies. See how things are going. Maybe start a.
Well, you know, I want to see if you can just make the whole second hour into a movie-related theme.
Do it.
We've done Trading Places and Mary Poppins. I mean, what else is there to say?
Geez, I don't know. I mean, I'd love to find out more about this Cocaine Bear film. Quite honestly, I thought that was
that is your
joke,
assignment, right? So you have to somehow get Cocaine Bear and the Big Short into the next hour.
I guess so. Well, I told you I do have a way to get the Wolf of Wall Street into the next hour. So I guess we can do that. I can't fit it into this hour, but I can tell you that I could try to fit it into the next hour for another 15 seconds or so. And then the music starts, and then I guess we successfully have done the first segment.
Here's the article I saw in passing finally flashed by me on Twitter. Yes. This is from Forbes. The Russian army is running out of T-72 tanks, and quickly. Okay. The worsening shortfall helps to explain why the Russians are equipping their newly mobilized battalions with old tanks.
T-71s, the old out model.
T-3s.
Oh. DC-7s and all sorts of things. All right. Well, they're running out of tanks.
They have to use the R2s now because they're out of T-62s and T-80s.
R2s. That could be work. All right. Well, so running out of, the mercenaries are out of ammunition. The regular army is out of tanks.
Right. The Republican Party's out of candidates.
Yeah.
And Mike Pence is out of excuses. And there you have it. That wraps up the first hour. And I will see you on Wednesday.
You're out of here. So there you go. Excellent. All right. On Wednesday, we'll recap all of, I don't know. Did they already have the Tony Awards? No award ceremonies left? I don't know. We'll have to look it up and see. I forget the order of these things. Thanks, Greg. We'll see you in a couple days. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. And, on our way out the door here, Greg was like, by the way, did we ever mention like one bed you never mentioned? And I don't know. He said didn't get around to it either, but pointing out all that talk, I never talked about which film won Best Picture. And I didn't know. I thought, I guess since everybody was talking about Everything Everywhere All at Once, that it won Best Picture as well. And although that was a little puzzling to me because I was like I had said at the beginning, I don't know that was really the Best Picture, although it was probably the best one that I saw, certainly. So, that's all there was to it. Did it win? Did it not win? It did win that. Okay. Everything Everywhere All at Once wins Best Picture. Okay. That makes sense. Because that's what everyone was talking about. Although I know they were talking about the individual actors having won as well. And sometimes if you do things like don't watch any of the Oscars whatsoever, then you're going to run into problems knowing who the winners were. But all right, so he too was a little confused about it. All Quiet on the Western Front won 4 Oscars out of 9 nominations. And let's see, 1 for international feature cinematography, original score, and production design. But Everything Everywhere All at Once is the best picture, which, all right, fine, I guess so. I guess pretty much, well, my rule of thumb is if I've seen it, it's probably not winning the best picture. I don't know why that would be it, but there you go. And All Quiet on the Western Front, I didn't even realize, I don't know, did I not see this version? I've seen All Quiet on the Western Front productions, different ones, 3, 4 of them, I guess. I didn't even realize, I don't know, maybe I did see the new one. I have no idea anymore. With the way movies are released and streamed on the various streaming services, I'm very rarely these days, I notice, very rarely aware of whether what I'm watching is new or not. So let me see. Well, this is the one that won the thing. So 2023 production. I probably did see this one on, one of the streaming services. I'm clicking on the damn thing and it won't show me any of it, but okay, fine. I didn't think it was going to show me the movie, but I thought it would show me some stills from it or something. And I think this is the one that does, when you turn on Netflix on the smart TV, this pops up, and I'm pretty sure I clicked on it. But I always, like I said, I'm confused about when things come out and what's new or not. I'm still a holdover from, HBO days was the only movie channel that there really was. And you didn't get movies that had recently been in the theater. It was a couple of years between theatrical release and getting something on HBO. Whereas now, with the streaming services, one, it's very quick. Then COVID changed a lot of things too. You couldn't go to the theaters, so there was simultaneous theatrical release plus streaming, sometimes pay-per-view type streaming, sometimes, amazingly enough, free on the streaming. And of course, lots of movies that are contenders for Oscars being produced by streaming networks directly for their consumption. And, I guess they also do a theatrical release in order to make something eligible for the Oscars. And also I turn on Netflix all the time and they say, hey, here's something new that you haven't seen. So I watch it and I say, hey, this is fun. How come I haven't heard anything about this movie? It's a good one. I haven't seen it promoted anywhere. And it turns out that it was made in 2014. They're just only getting around to streaming it now. And I say, wow, fantastic. It confuses me if you don't pay close attention to the dates, you lose track of these things. But I guess All Quiet on, I guess I saw that too. A big year for movies for me. And I think streaming services has a lot to do with that. I'm more up to date on movies. It used to be, like I said, it'd be a couple of years between something winning an Oscar and my getting a chance to see it because I wasn't going to the theaters. So there you have it. The shut-in news brings you up to speed on all of these things. All right. So I mentioned to you that there was a way to work in another movie reference. And I guess it would require like dedicating the second hour to this. But I mean, it's a weird sweeping tale. And I have a feeling that it will become a part of all of our lives somehow in the next couple of months to years. And we'll all be glad we heard more about it. So I saw an inkling about it the other day, and I said, that's a weird headline. What the hell is this thing all about? I guess the best way to, I don't know, we'll set the background and bring ourselves up to speed with a quick hit from CNBC from a while ago. And again, you got to pay attention to the dates. I had to go looking for this one just to say, well, what's the background on this story? Because I got 2 long explainer stories. And I said, I need a quick backgrounder first. So I'm going back to June of 2021 for this one. And long time and very close listeners to the KITM show will remember, if they also have fantastic memories, because I haven't talked about it a lot, the very weird story that in some peripheral way at least also wove into the picture the very strange Chinese dissident billionaire / Steve Bannon compatriot / funder of weird psyops here in the United States, Guo Wenyi, right? The guy who owned the yacht that Steve Bannon was arrested on before Steve Bannon was eventually pardoned for the thing he was arrested for while he was on the guy's yacht. And the Malaysian Sovereign Wealth Fund, the 1MDB fund. You remember? It's been a long time since we talked about 1MDB. And we didn't do that much on it. Just noting that this seemed like impossibly complicated with all sorts of bad actors on every side of every possible issue tied up in this thing. And there's no one to root for. And you just have to hope that everybody gets arrested, except that eventually when they finally do arrest everybody, then, they'll start arresting people that you're like, hey, wait a minute, that guy might actually be a good guy. What are we arresting him for? Now I'm concerned. And you should have thought of that earlier. I don't know. So what are we talking about here? The June 2021 article in CNBC lays out the basics of why and how the 1MDB thing has exploded to encompass so many more people, and including people that you're like, I don't immediately recognize this as a bad person. What's happening here? Fugees rapper Pras and Jho Low, Jho Low, Low, which made me think, I'm like, does it really rhyme? Is it Jho Low? Is it Lao? But all the pronunciation guides, I went and checked all the pronunciations. I'm looking at articles and or videos and interviews and places where they mention the name. They say Jho Low is his name. He's the Malaysian businessman most closely associated with the 1MDB, I guess, misappropriation, embezzlement, money laundering type stuff. So he somehow gets himself embroiled with the guy from the Fugees, Pras. It's Pras Michel, and there's a whole backstory about how, and then we'll start looking at those things in these next two long write-ups. But this is from June of 21. Fugees rapper Pras and Jho Low charged in scheme to get Trump administration to drop the 1MDB probe. You can see why they would want them to drop the 1MDB probe. You're in trouble for it. And here, basically, really, we're talking about Jho Low. But Pras gets himself in trouble here, too. This is real interesting. So here's the background, or the quick hit thing on it. A federal grand jury, back in June of 2021, has hit the fugitive Malaysia financier Jho Low and Fugees, who's, refugees, Fugees, not fugitive, but it's interesting that the two of them somehow find one another. Fugees rapper, his actual name is Prakazrel, is that right? But he goes by Pras. Pras Michel with new criminal charges. They're now old criminal charges at this point, accusing them of running a back channel campaign to get the Trump administration to drop an investigation of Low and the 1MDB investment company and to have a Chinese dissident returned to China. The Chinese dissident being, of course, Guo Wenyi, which presented a problem for the Trump administration because, well, one, you never know where the Trump administration stands with China. Are they pro-China? Are they anti-China? They like to say they're anti-China, but then they do the whole most delicious chocolate cake thing. And by the way, Jamie Raskin has been lighting up the weaponization of government subcommittee hearings. Is that the one where he's doing it, where they keep screaming about how badly the Biden administration, for some reason, is handling COVID and handled COVID, and that they're not attacking China enough for leaking the contagion and doing horrible things to the world. And Raskin is doing a bang-up job reading them the quotes from Donald Trump at the time, lavishing praise on President Xi of China and what a terrific job he's doing handling the virus, because yada, yada, chocolate cake. Anyway, it was a weird thing for the Trump administration to deal with because Guo Wenyi was financing a lot of Steve Bannon ventures. So they didn't want to screw the guy over and send him back to China. And also they didn't want to be seen as doing what China was asking for. But then on the other hand, they were also being pressured by other fabulously wealthy people who could slip them stolen funds to send Guo Wengi back to China after all. So they didn't know what to do. Sell out the guy who's financing Steve Bannon, because who cares about Steve Bannon? I'm me. Not sure. Or do we say, let's let Steve Bannon do his thing because eventually he'll be helping us with his thing? They should have realized that Steve Bannon can't help anybody with anything, so you might as well take the money and run. Well, anyway, where were we with this? Right. Pras and Jho Low were trying to get the Trump administration to drop the investigation into 1MDB and send Guo Wengi back to China. The new charges against Low, now, like we said, old charges. Low, who was then 39, so I guess now is 40, what were we talking about 2 years ago? 41 or so. And 48 now, 51. Yeah, happy birthday, 50. 48-year-old Michel comes 6 months after former President Donald Trump pardoned former top Republican fundraiser Elliot Broidy. I know you'll remember him. He's in this too. Pardoned him in connection with his guilty plea in October for his role in this illegal lobbying effort on Low's behalf. We forgot all about Elliot Broidy, but he's in here too. CNBC has reached out to Broidy's lawyer to ask whether Broidy testified before the grand jury that indicted Low and Michel. Because of his pardon, Broidy would be unable to invoke his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination if called to testify at a grand jury investigating his activities related to Low and Michel. And I don't know whether he ever, in the interim, was in fact called, but I guess the fact that this is all back in the news says somebody's been talking to grand juries. Broidy, who is a Los Angeles-based businessman, was paid $9 million for his efforts on their behalf, with the expectation of tens of millions more in success fees. Federal authorities have said Low and Michel were charged 2 years ago. And remember, this article was written 2 years ago. So Low and Michel were charged 4 years ago in federal court in Washington, D.C., with allegedly illegally funneling millions of dollars of Low's money to support the 2012 presidential campaign of then President Barack Obama. And now we're starting to see the part of the story where other people, hey, wait a minute, he's a good guy, getting roped into these things. The Justice Department, for years, has investigated and filed criminal cases and civil forfeiture actions related to the embezzlement of billions of dollars from One Malaysia Development Berhad, B-E-R-H-A-D. I don't know what that means, but that's why we know it as 1MDB, because we don't know what B means. It's not bank, it's not bonus fund, whatever, Berhad. I don't know what it means. Maybe in Malaysian language it means something. I have no idea. Look it up. I have to read. Someone look it up and tell me, and then I'll find out after the show that you told me. This is, of course, a strategic investment and development company that's wholly owned by the government of Malaysia. Low, who is believed to be in China. He's Malaysian, but he's in China. He is allegedly at the center of that scheme to loot 1MDB. That's why he's not in Malaysia. If he was in Malaysia, he'd be in jail in Malaysia, presumably. He was charged in 2018 in Brooklyn federal court with conspiring to launder billions of dollars embezzled from the company and with paying bribes to officials in Malaysia, so maybe he wouldn't be in jail there, and Abu Dhabi. Low and his associates allegedly used some swindled cash to buy real estate, yachts, and jets. That's kind of what you do with stolen money. As well as to, I told you this was coming, finance Martin Scorsese's The Wolf of Wall Street, a film, ironically enough, I would say, about a financial fraudster. So it's a good pick for them. But there you go. Not only it's not, they'd go beyond method acting in The Wolf of Wall Street. They are method producing The Wolf of Wall Street. We're stealing the money to produce this movie about stealing money. It's really quite fascinating. Anyway, just to wrap things up with the CNBC backgrounder here, the indictment issued Thursday, it's years ago, by a grand jury in Washington accuses Low and Michel of conspiring with Broidy, also a woman named Nikki Lum Davis, actually a big Republican fundraiser, as it turns out, and others to engage in undisclosed lobbying campaigns at the direction of Low and the Vice Minister of Public Security for the People's Republic of China, respectively, according to the Justice Department. The goals of these campaigns were, quote, both to have the 1MDB embezzlement investigation and forfeiture proceedings involving Low and others dropped, and to have a Chinese dissident sent back to China. The dissident is understood to be, it's an interesting way of putting it, Guo Wengi, also known as Miles Kwok or Miles Guo, which I wonder whether Kwok and Guo are just, different pronunciations of the same thing, and we anglicize them in weird ways. I think that's what's going on. But anyway, I don't know where the miles comes from, but that's a frequent thing, adopting sort of a easier to say westernized given name just to make people like me who can't pronounce anything more comfortable, I guess, so that we'll turn over our money to them. Anyway, the new indictment also accuses Michel and Low of conspiring to commit money laundering related to the foreign influence campaigns, the Justice Department said. Michel is additionally charged with witness tampering and conspiracy to make false statements to banks. Banks back in the news. Davis pleaded guilty in August, that's Nikki Lum Davis, to violating the Foreign Lobbying Act as part of the Justice Department's probe involving 1MDB. Also in August, Trump's former senior advisor Steve Bannon was arrested on Guo's yacht off the coast of Connecticut on federal criminal charges, accusing him and others of defrauding thousands of donors through a crowdfunding campaign to privately build sections of the wall, a wall, quote unquote, the wall, against or along the U.S.-Mexico border. Trump pardoned Bannon on his last night in office, the same time he pardoned Broidy. The investment bank Goldman Sachs last year entered into a deferred prosecution agreement with the Justice Department related to the conspiracy in which the bank and its Malaysian unit violated U.S. bribery laws by paying Malaysian and Abu Dhabi officials to get business from 1MDB. Goldman, which received around $600 million in fees for bond deals that funded the bank, agreed to pay more than $2.9 billion as part of that deferred prosecution agreement. All right. So now you've kind of sort of got the background, and I got to hurry, I think, if we're going to make any sense out of any of this. I'm going to jump over quick to the next one of the more recent articles. And here's the setup that we've got. I saw this the other day and I said, that's interesting, but that'll never become relevant to us, on the show. And plus it's a long read, but I really, would like to know what's going on. This in Bloomberg, in Business Week, but you'll find it at Bloomberg.com, and written up by familiar name Jason Leopold, along with Matthew Campbell and Anthony Cormier, who write The Fuji, that's Michel, The Fuji, The Fugitive, get it, and the FBI. That's a lot of alliteration there. How rapper Pras Michel got entangled. I'd love to know. How did this guy get into all this? How Pras Michel got entangled in one of the century's great financial scandals, mediated a high-stakes negotiation between global superpowers, and was accused of major crimes. Unfortunately, you're going to get accused of major crimes if you are negotiating high-stakes deals between global superpowers and you're not a government official. You're not supposed to be involved in all of that. I think that's the likely outcome. But what's really interesting is you can see along the way the tension between, hey, I'm just kind of he's not a regular guy per se, but he's not a government figure. But he's like, I'm trying to do the right thing, or what looks like it might be the right thing, for a bunch of people who have treated me pretty well. They're financing my projects. I think I want to help them. Sometimes it sounds like we might be able to get somebody who's being held prisoner in China out of China, and that sounds like a good thing. There's never really a clear moment at which you're saying, wow, this guy, like Elliot Broidy or Steve Bannon, is in it for some bad reasons. But yet, you wonder, when are you going to back off of doing this? You are definitely in over your head here, and there are some problems. Well, what we might not get to, but I feel like we should, but I want to at least tell you it's out there. On the other side of the coin, I think maybe the other side of the coin, is something from Rolling Stone that came out again, this time over the weekend, and made me say, all right, now I really have to read these two stories together. The feds say Pras is a foreign agent. Now the Fuji tells his side to Michael Ames of Rolling Stone. and it might be interesting to find out what exactly did he think was going on this whole time. But what does he think about what? About what? The what is described here by Jason Leopold et al. In Business Week. Ready? Okay. The phone call awoke Pras Michel in the middle of a spring night in 2017. Things are going back. And remember, this also ends up ensnaring the 2012 presidential election. What did the phone call say? His, quote, cousin from China. Now, he's not Chinese, right? So, his cousin from China needed to meet, the woman on the line said. The caller was an ex-girlfriend who Michel, a rapper, producer, and member of legendary hip-hop group The Fugees, hadn't spoken to in years. He grew up in a Haitian family in New Jersey and does not have a cousin from China, but he knew what the message meant. So we're already wink, wink in, intrigue here. Michel dressed and called a car to take him to the Four Seasons Hotel on 57th Street in Manhattan. Okay. The front desk clerk handed him a note. It instructed him to exit the hotel and circle the block twice, scanning to see if he was being tailed. So, that's like high intrigue or dramatic music kind of intrigue. Michel did as he was told, and he returned to the clerk, who gave him a room key. He went up to an empty suite and waited. So really, they should be arresting the clerk here. Who told you to do this? And I'm sure that they've already talked to the guy, but imagine this. You're already involved in this. You get there, the guy gives you a note, walk around the block twice, come back, then they give you a key. Just give me the key. No, I'm executing the instructions as written. And this is a front desk clerk at the Four Seasons Hotel. I don't know. Anyway, after about 25 minutes, there was a knock on the door. So you go up and wait in an empty suite. An austere-looking Chinese security agent in a suit gave Michel a second room key. How about that? And told him to go to the penthouse. Just send me there. No, this is how we do it. Inside, another agent took Michel's phones and placed them in a pouch. A table and two chairs sat in the middle of a room. They can't kill me in the Four Seasons, Michel said to himself. So already he's like, okay, this is a little fishy. What am I getting into here? Now, all of a sudden, ready? Soon a short, chubby man with wavy hair arrived, surrounded by more security personnel. Michel had met him before. He was Sun Lijun, China's Vice Minister of Public Security. Yikes, don't get mixed up with that guy. Sun began shouting in Chinese. An interpreter translated for Michel. Who the F do the U.S. government think they are? That's a mighty powerful statement there. And, they think they're the U.S. government and they do what they want is the answer to that. But okay, why would the Chinese not know that? I don't know. He's just angry. Sun said he'd come from to the U.S. for sensitive negotiations with President Donald Trump's administration, but had failed to secure a high-level meeting. To which I'm sure this guy is like, what do I have to do with this? For 3 years, Beijing had been targeting Chinese nationals living in America who it viewed as threats. Agents had surveilled emigres, visited their houses, and detained family members still in China, aiming to persuade the targets to return home, where some would be charged with serious crimes. Called Operation Fox Hunt, the covert repatriation strategy had infuriated U.S. officials. And, you can see why it would, and it's dangerous and weird and scary. You leave the country, your home country, to come to America seeking freedom, etc., and you think you're resettling here, you're on the other side of the globe, but the Chinese government is following you and making trouble for you anyway. You'd think they'd be happy to have them out of the country. But apparently that's not enough. Not in the age of the internet, I guess. Of particular concern to Sun was Guo Wengi, a real estate billionaire living on a temporary visa in New York. From his home overlooking Central Park, Guo had enraged the Chinese government by making a series of scandalous claims to the media, purporting to reveal the assets of top Communist Party officials. China was prepared to release 2 American citizens, one of them pregnant, who were being kept in the country under a so-called exit ban if the U.S. deported Guo. So they're holding someone hostage, much the same way the Russians did with Brittany Griner, right? Behind the scenes, the U.S. government had been agitating for their return. But when Sun and his entourage arrived in Washington hoping to make a deal, Attorney General Jeff Sessions, remember him, was traveling and unable to meet with them, according to an email Sessions wrote in May of 2017. Unsure what to do next, Sun sought Michel's help. Why? The Justice Department apparently declined to comment. They let us know parenthetically. This is way above my pay grade, Michel said after Sun laid out the situation. But if I were you, I would at least send the pregnant woman back as a token of good faith. Like, that's a good idea, right? But why is he offering any ideas at all? I don't know. But you figure, free the pregnant woman at least. You think so? Sun asked. Now, calmer and speaking in English. An agent handed Sun a telephone. After a brief conversation, what happens? He turns again to Michel and asks, when do you want her back? Michel, who'd won 2 Grammys with the Fugees before going on to a solo career, was unsure about the usual time frame for international hostage repatriations. Tomorrow? He asked. The weekend is no good. Monday? Tuesday? By Tuesday, the woman was back in the U.S. So sounds pretty good, right? Why are these things turning bad? And I guess the answer still lies in, what are you doing here talking to Chinese security officials? You're crazy. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Net Roots Radio. By the way, our good friend Ricky, our Kanakistani friend, who wonders whether the B in 1MDB is just to make it sound good, because 1MD makes it sound like this is an online site to look up drug information. It's a thought, but it prompted me to check it out during the break, and I had said we really ought to during the reading, and why not? You learn something. And you're supposed to learn something every day. It's supposed to be something new. Maybe this is not new for you, but it's new for me. And maybe I already learned something today, and I'm just overdoing it at this stage. But Berhad, I don't know how you pronounce it, but Berhad, Berhad is my pronunciation of it. Maybe I could look something up. Is apparently, according to the internets, and I guess this comes from Investopedia, the top hit on the Google search for it. It is a suffix used in Malaysia to identify a public limited company. So it's something like incorporated here. So 1MD Inc. or 1MD LLC, sometimes we'll say. There's various ways of incorporating. And some like in Germany, is it GmbH or whatever? I don't know. SA in certain places. In Latin America sometimes. Maybe that's so it's something like that. The suffix, it goes on to say, Sendirian Berhad, SDN BHT, identifies a private limited company. SDN BHT companies are typically small or mid-sized enterprises, whereas BHD alone, Berhad, those are the largest companies in Malaysia. So stands to reason that it would be one. There's one MD Berhad is essentially it. And I forget what the rest of the Malaysian development. So, okay. The one is for, we only have one. I don't know. Or we put all our eggs in one basket here in MDB. So now that question is answered. So we have learned something new today. We've also learned, of course, that the Fugees rapper Pras Michel somehow got himself involved in international intrigues, and now we're intrigued to find out why and how that might have been. But the good news is that by Tuesday, this pregnant woman who was being held by the Chinese government had been returned to the United States. And I'm sure he walked out of there saying, well, I didn't get murdered in there. That's great. And I got somebody who was being held unjustly, who was pregnant, of all things, on top of it all, released and sent back to the United States. So I guess this is all working out. About 2 months later, an FBI special agent interrupted Michel at brunch near his apartment in Soho. And I mean, I guess you can't go on with your fabulous lifestyle uninterrupted forever before the FBI comes and says, what are you doing having secret meetings, walking twice around the block, moving room to room to room, talking to the Chinese security minister and negotiating the release of prisoners for? What's up with that? How dare you interrupt my brunch? It's like, well, we have questions. The agent had 12 photos of Chinese officials and many questions. Who did Michel meet at the Four Seasons? Who else had contacted him from the Chinese government? And, of course, how had a famous rapper and record producer found himself in the middle of a high-stakes negotiation between global superpowers? Michel's audience with a top Chinese security official, reported here for the first time, was a flashpoint in one of the most unusual political influence campaigns in recent memory. His involvement began by chance around 2006. This is a long-running soap opera, when he met a baby-faced Malaysian businessman named Jho Low. And it's not J-O-E, it's J-H-O. Low was a globe-trotting financier whose lavish spending would put him on familiar terms with dozens of A-list entertainers. It's already becoming a distasteful story, but wait till you see what happens here. By 2016, U.S. investigators believed he'd masterminded the embezzlement of billions of dollars from the Malaysian sovereign wealth fund 1MDB, blowing much of it on artwork, real estate, and gifts for celebrity friends. It's pretty amazing, including Leonardo DiCaprio and Kim Kardashian. Not to mention Pras Michel over here, who didn't get gifts but got investments, I guess. Few were as close to Low as Michel. Prosecutors seized $95 million that they alleged originated with Low from Michel's accounts. $95 million of his wealth. The money that was putting him in penthouse apartments in Soho and allowing him to brunch out after things like this. And I guess if you're sitting on $95 million, you probably, though you might think twice, why am I meeting with Chinese security officials? I guess at some point, if you've got $100 million in the bank, I could be meeting with anybody. It's all logical at some level, I guess. By the way, right, celebrity gifts, like for Leonardo DiCaprio, who of course was the star of The Wolf of Wall Street. We'll hear more details, I think, if we get to them, about what those gifts were. Plus a little bit more about Kardashian. Not too much more, but enough to sort of make you say, I knew I hated those Kardashians. With U.S. authorities closing in and moving to confiscate his assets, Low needed help, and Michel will need it later on. He first turned to Michel somehow, hoping to cash in on the star's connections to President Barack Obama, remember the time frame here, for whom Michel had raised money during the 2012 campaign. Next, Low turned to China. If I can't get the rapper guy from the Fugees to help fix things with the government, maybe China will do it. Why China? That's one of the few countries that could protect him from the long reach of American law enforcement, plus Malaysian, I guess, law enforcement. Low didn't reply to requests for comment. China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs said in a statement that it was, quote, unaware of the events described in this story. Sun, who received, by the way, not a medal from the Chinese government for trying to mediate this, but rather a suspended death sentence for corruption offenses last year, couldn't be reached. Yeah, not likely that somebody being held on a suspended death sentence in China is going to be reachable by Bloomberg or anybody else for that matter. To investigate this wild tale of celebrity and political intrigue, Bloomberg Businessweek drew on legal filings, interviews with people close to the case, and a cache of previously undisclosed FBI and Justice Department documents. The records show how Michel, at Low's request, helped assemble a team of Republican influencers, including fundraiser Elliot Broidy, businesswoman Nikki Lum Davis, and casino magnate Steve Wynn, another dirty dog, capable of reaching the highest levels of the Trump administration as it took hold of the U.S. government. Soon, all would be targeted by agents from the FBI's International Corruption Division, as well as federal prosecutors from Honolulu to New York. The U.S. didn't catch Low, but it did squeeze his associates. And I was reading this earlier, as it did squeeze his associates. For some reason, it struck me that was kind of odd. But okay. Many agreed to cooperate and pursue plea deals with prosecutors. Michel declined, and the consequences for him could be dire. And I don't know whether that was bad legal advice or he was just saying, hey, honestly, there's no reason for me to be mixed up in this except that I thought, first it was just a dude who might finance my things, and then he was asking me to help with stuff, and it was like, get a pregnant woman out of jail in China? That's good, right? And I'm not going to cop to this just to get a reduced sentence. I think we should drag this all out in the open. Maybe he's doing the right thing here. I don't know. It's hard to tell, but he certainly put a lot on the line. Where were we? Yes, right. Federal prosecutors charged him in 2021, as we read from CNBC, with 10 offenses stemming from his dealings with Low, ranging from conspiracy to witness tampering and acting as an unregistered agent of a foreign government. Michel maintains his innocence and has decided to fight the charges. The common thread that runs through this is that Pras was trying to get the benefits for the United States that were being offered by Minister Sun, says his attorney David Kenner. Pras's motivation was to try to assist the United States. Kenner adds that Michel's relationship with Low was rooted in a desire to secure investment for entertainment projects. Right? It wasn't altruistic necessarily that he had a relationship with Low, but whatever it was that he was pursuing from Low got him mixed up in things where look, I'm sitting here with a Chinese security minister who's asking me, do you want me to release a pregnant woman that we're holding as hostage and let her come back to the United States? Yes. Okay. Well, I guess I'd say yes too. The trial is scheduled to begin in Washington in late March. That means it's coming up. That's why it's back in the news. If convicted, Michel could go to federal prison for decades. Now, next section here. All Michel knew about Low, the Malaysian guy he'd been asked to meet in 2006, was that he was loaded and liked hanging out with celebrities. Sounds like a good whale, right? A good target. The venue was a nightclub in Manhattan's meatpacking district. A couple of other patrons that night, Wall Street types, paid the club for a chance to get on the microphone. They announced that they were the richest people in the room and planned to buy everyone a drink, which does seem like a Wall Street type thing to do. Kind of weird. Not to be outdone, Low paid even more to use the mic and said he'd be buying every bottle in the nightclub, everything that the nightclub had on hand, and that the staff should go to the club across the street so he could buy their bottles too. Well, that'll show you who's the richest guy in the room. It's a bit of a waste, but okay. Later, around 2011, Michel and Low became close friends. He was just one of many celebrities Low cozied up to during a whirlwind of yacht vacations, club nights, and gambling, lubricated by his vast financial resources. Now, this is where Kardashian comes back into it, just to let you know. I don't know what the story is behind this, but I don't know. I read this and I was like, God damn. Kardashian would later tell the FBI she'd bought a Ferrari using $305,000 Low gave her in cash. And I just thought, I don't know what the circumstances of this were, but I mean, I don't know. To me, I was sort of like, okay, so I'm Kim Kardashian. I'm loaded as it is. This guy gives me $305,000 in cash. Why? I do not know. But like, why the inclination isn't, well, I'm already loaded. I don't know why the guy gave me $305,000 in cash, but why don't I go find a worthy charity and I'll make a name for myself given $300,000. I'll keep $5,000 for fun. I'll buy, a gold-plated hamburger with it. I don't know. And $300,000 to a big charity of my choice, whatever, fantastic. But instead, Kim Kardashian, who could buy Ferraris left and right anyway, says, you know what? I should just get another Ferrari with it. But I don't know why that doesn't say why he gave her the $305,000. And I mean, I guess if she did a service or performed a thing, something, I don't know what she does for a living, quite honestly, but she makes an appearance for $300,000 at his party, whatever it is, right? Like, you've earned the money. So it's not like I said, hi, how you doing? He's like, hi, how are you? Here's $300,000. So it's a total windfall. You know, I mean, if you're rich, even if you're super rich, you do a thing, you earn the money, you might say, oh, I'm going to buy myself a Ferrari. But it's the way it's presented, like he just gave her $300,000 in cash. I don't know. Somehow I feel like that should be given away. But what do I know? I'm not a fabulously wealthy person, so I don't know what they do. So there you go. This weird, shady character gives her $300,000. She says, I think I'll have a Ferrari. The supermodel Miranda Kerr, Kerr, whom Lowe briefly dated, received about $8 million in jewelry. Wow. Lowe was especially generous with Leonardo DiCaprio, donating a $3.2 million Picasso and a $9.2 million Basquiat to his charity. And at least it goes to his charity, right? But then at some point the whole thing is repossessed anyway, so I don't know. But I guess, is that like in trying to convince him, like, take the role in The Wolf of Wall Street and I'll give you this fabulous thing for your charity? Is that what happened here? He also financed The Wolf of Wall Street, a film DiCaprio had been trying to develop for years, but that's a great way of getting him to be your pal now. DiCaprio and Kerr later turned over items that they'd received from Lowe to the U.S. government, so they're not going to sit there and fight about it. But I guess that's how you get to be a celebrity pal. If you can pay your way into one of these clubs and you get introduced to the guy, and I guess that's the way people like DiCaprio get things done, right? You know, they'll later get a big award for being the producer of this thing, but you know, you sit there drinking and you talk to the rich guy next to you and you say, you know what I would really think would be great is I got this great idea for a movie, but no one will finance it. I'm an idiot and I'm totally rich and I want to be your friend. I'll finance it. And they know that that's going to happen. And they say, what do I care? You know, I want to get this movie made and no one will give me money, but this guy will. So fine. You pitch it to him and off you go. And the rest of us just think, oh, this was produced because some smart people thought this was a really good movie and a great idea, so I should go see it. And really, it was just DiCaprio, and he couldn't convince any of the supposed geniuses to, I don't know. Anyway, it's another weird story all by itself. Back to this one. In Michel, Lowe had found a friend who was no less than music royalty, born Prakazrel Michel. He'd been raised in a strict home in New Jersey, telling an interviewer in 2007 that his parents forbade him from watching TV or even wearing sneakers. Oh my. He met his future collaborators Lauryn Hill in high school, collaborator, the singular, Lauryn Hill in high school, later forming the group that became the Fugees with one of his friends, Wyclef Jean. Their second album, The Score, was one of the most influential records of the 1990s, a double Grammy winner that sold more than 18 million copies. The Fugees disbanded not long after releasing The Score, and apart from one hit, Ghetto Superstar, That Is What You Are, Michel's solo career never really took off, but he continued to earn money from the band's songs and maintained a lavish lifestyle, including a $30,000 a month New York apartment. His tastes tended toward the flashy. Patek Philippe watches, okay, and a Lamborghini SUV, which I didn't even know they made, which he showed off on social media. According to email records, Michel's financial advisor periodically admonished him for spending beyond his means, complaining at one point that he'd gone $250,000 over budget in a 2-month period alone. His lawyer, Kenner, says Michel's financial situation wasn't strained, however. Some have advanced the notion that Pras was hurting for money and that might show a motive to become involved in those matters that led to his indictment, he says. Nothing could be further from the truth. And yet he was very, very, very attracted to all that money anyway, for some strange reason. Michel was different from the other celebrities in Low's coterie. He saw himself as something more than a rapper and producer, and he'd become what Kenner calls a connector, a man with a thick Rolodex of friends in politics, entertainment, and finance. Always dangerous. Beyond music, Michel took on a range of projects, often focused on social justice or political issues. Good. Spending 9 days, for instance, on Skid Row in Los Angeles for a documentary. Traveling to the Somali coast in search of high seas pirates for another film. Serving as an advisor to Michel Martelly, the performer who became Haiti's president in 2011. And shame on me for not immediately being able to pronounce the name of a person who became president of a neighboring country. Closer to home, Michel was a passionate supporter of President Obama. Government documents show that he wanted to become a more serious player, even mentioning a desire to be considered for an ambassadorship. This is a little weird, but Kenner says Michel quickly dropped the idea once he was told that he would have to live in the country where he was an ambassador. Like, oh no. I mean, what did he ask to be ambassador to? I want to be ambassador to hell. I just thought that would be cool and interesting. Well, you'll have to live there. I mean, I wonder what he chose that made him say, no, I don't want to live there. Michel bankrolled a political action committee called Black Men Vote PAC, and in the run-up to the 2012 election, told a Democratic official in an email that he was, quote, thinking about doing a fundraiser, looking to raise anywhere from $5 to $10 million. Okay, great. A mutual friend forwarded the email to Low and told him, erroneously, if it was in fact just an error, that, quote, being a foreigner is not a problem. In fact, foreign nationals are prohibited from donating to U.S. campaigns, including via PACs. But that didn't matter, apparently. Low wanted in. Federal prosecutors said he sidestepped the law, which he, I guess, eventually found out about, or already knew about, by sending more than $21 million to Michel, who then used his own accounts and various straw donors to contribute about $2 million to Obama's re-election effort. It's not clear what happened to the rest. Kenner says Michel depended on a lawyer and advisors to manage his financial activities. $21 million in, $2 million out. What happened to the rest? Don't know. But he has Lamborghini SUVs and goes $250,000 over budget in the space of 2 months. Low was preoccupied with projecting an image of success, and after Obama won, he received some of what he craved. Another Democratic donor, tech executive Frank White Jr., told the FBI that late in 2012 he brought Low to a holiday party at the White House. Why? Because he's been giving me money, and I had a ticket, so whatever. That's where Low posed for a photo with the president and first lady. You can see it in the article here. A representative for the Obamas declined to comment. But if Low thought his donations would buy him political cover in Washington, he was mistaken. In 2015, as press reports about the graft at 1MDB multiplied, the FBI and the DOJ opened an investigation led by Robert Huchling, I'm guessing at the pronunciation of Heuchling, a special agent with the Bureau's International Corruption Unit in New York. Probably knows all about the SDNY. According to a later FBI memo, the lines of inquiry included investigating the theft of embezzled funds and their laundering into the U.S., as well as potential violations of banking rules and anti-bribery laws by Low's network of enablers. Agents soon identified Michel as a Low ally and a potential cooperating witness. About a year after the investigation was opened, federal prosecutors in California filed a sprawling forfeiture action seeking to seize more than $1 billion in assets that Low and his associates had accumulated. The filing spoke to the lifestyle of astonishing glitz that they'd built since 1MDB's establishment in 2009 in New York, a penthouse in the Time Warner Center, and luxury condos in Chelsea and Soho. Now, note again, I note that they say 1MDB was established in 2009, but in 2006, he's hanging around New York trying to make inroads and meeting celebrities and flashing wealth. Where's the wealth coming from? He had other wealth, I guess, and then embezzled even more of it from 1MDB. That's interesting, too. What else do they have? In Los Angeles, a boutique hotel and multiple mansions, a Bombardier Global 5000 jet, a material stake in EMI Music Publishing, the rights holder for songs by Drake, Queen, and other artists. The rights to The Wolf of Wall Street were also the subject of a seizure complaint. Continuing on here, in the summer of 2016, Michel was in Saint-Tropez on France's sun-soaked Côte d'Azur when he, pardon my pronunciation there, pardon my French, actually, when he ran into Low's brother. I'm surprised he would even recognize him, but a guy probably said, "Hey, I'm Low's brother." His brother's name is Zen, I guess, not Z, but S-Z-E-N, Zen. I don't know how to make that sound. Zen asked Michel to speak to Low, who explained his issues with the DOJ and dismissed the U.S. allegations as all lies. Low complained that his legal team was moving too slowly to resolve the cases, which were making it difficult for him to operate. He wondered if Michel had ideas about who could help. When I have trouble operating, that means I have trouble giving you financing and gifts. After the Democrats' defeat in the 2016 election, halting a case as large as the one against Low required pull with the freshly installed Trump administration. Michel did not have any, but he knew someone who might. In early 2017, he spoke with an old friend, Nikki Lum Davis, a TV producer who split her time between Los Angeles and Hawaii. Lum Davis had an unusual political pedigree. Her parents, Eugene and Nora Lum, had been major fundraisers for Bill Clinton and had eventually pleaded guilty to arranging illegal donations. Boo. Lum Davis's own connections were weighted toward Republicans. It's interesting. She'd converted to Judaism, of all things, after meeting her now ex-husband, J-Date co-founder Joe Shapira. I guess it didn't work out for him, or maybe he founded J-Date after he divorced and needed to find someone new. But okay. And became hawkishly pro-Israel. That's not out of keeping with republicanism, of course. On the coffee table in their home in Beverly Hills, the couple kept busts of Rudy Giuliani. Who would even make a bust of Rudy Giuliani? And George W. Bush. Boy, oh boy. Lum Davis suggested a name, Elliot Broidy, one of Southern California's most prolific Republican fundraisers. Michel asked her to send supporting materials he could relay to Low, including photos of Broidy with Trump, as well as a brief bio and notes about his connections to the president. Has long-standing relationship with, as he puts it, Secretary of Justice Department Jeff Sessions that goes back 15 years, the materials read. Broidy was also one of two people who are close to the boss that were instrumental in boss getting there, Trump that is, and did not take a job in the administration. A representative for Broidy declined to comment. Lum Davis didn't respond to a detailed request for comment. I guess that could mean Sessions rather than Trump. Not sure. Early one morning in mid-March, Michel, Lum Davis, and Broidy met at Broidy's Los Angeles office to hammer out a potential deal to work for Low. According to a later FBI interview summary, Michel told the others that Low was, quote, not a bad guy, but rather a smart businessman who simply wanted to deal with his legal issues. That won't matter at all to Broidy. Securing Broidy's help would be expensive. A draft agreement the group prepared called for Low to pay a retainer of $8 million. If the team succeeded in resolving the DOJ's forfeiture actions within 6 months, he'd pay $75 million in success fees. If it took 6 months to a year, the amount would drop to $50 million. Kenner says Michel mistakenly thought Broidy was a lawyer and wanted him to represent Low, not to influence government policy, as the U.S. government later asserted. To ensure that he received what he felt was fair, Michel insisted that the money and all communications with Low and his associates go through him. He, in turn, would deal with Lum Davis, who would pass on information to Broidy. He was concerned about being cut out, Lum Davis would later say. Cut out? Well, of what? Just money changing hands. He wasn't helping in any way, I guess. About a week after the meeting, a financial advisor set up 2 Delaware companies on Michel's behalf, Anicorn LLC and Artemis Group LLC. Not Berhan or whatever, Berhad. By the end of the month, both companies had accounts at Los Angeles-based City National Bank. The next step was to meet with Low, and who was, for obvious reasons, avoiding the U.S. because, of course, he was in trouble with 1MDB. He proposed they gather in Thailand. Broidy told Lum Davis he'd need $1 million just to get on the plane. And it had to come, as he says, from untainted funds. Reluctantly, Michel fronted it himself. The group then landed in Bangkok at the beginning of May. A few hours after they arrived at the hotel, Low showed up at Lum Davis's suite. According to court filings and grand jury testimony, Broidy told the group he believed he could use his ties to Sessions, Trump's attorney general, to persuade the U.S. government to drop its pursuit of 1MDB-related assets. But before any of that, there was the matter of money. You've had so many of your assets forfeited, how are you going to pay? Broidy asked. Low told his visitors not to worry. I have a friend who's helping me to pay for my bills, he said. The financier didn't identify the generous friend. Before the meeting ended, Michel raised another matter when it revealed another interested party, the Chinese government. He told Broidy and Lum Davis that Low was interested in Guo, the businessman living in New York who was making increasingly bold claims about corruption among high-ranking Chinese leaders. China had issued a notice seeking his arrest through Interpol weeks earlier, claiming Guo was wanted for bribery. It wasn't clear why Low would care about Guo's status, but he had reasons to seek favor from Beijing. According to the Wall Street Journal, China in 2016 had offered to bail out 1MDB, which owed billions more than it could repay, and with the U.S. criminal charges as a possibility, being useful to the Chinese government might provide Low a measure of protection.
You have been listening to Kagro.
Well, very interesting, don't you think? There is more, much more, and we didn't even get to the Rolling Stone version of things, but I have a feeling that this may break out into the open in the next couple of days, and I wanted to get it on record. Now time, of course, to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Probably nothing about this, but more about Silicon Valley Bank CEO Greg Becker and what he's up to. Stay tuned.